Hello, we're back. So today we're going with what we had in the title, the Unified Lunar Exploration Unit. This is the same unit we've been messing with for the last few videos. And so I believe this is going to be the last of this unit. And I'm going to work on something that's more realistic, something that's closer to what's actually out there. And a heavier lift unit. Of course. Whew. Way to start off a show, eh?
Hi everyone!
So, where were we? Oh yeah, Lunar Exploration Unit, unified version. What I've done is I've taken the code for the various things that we've done, the target ascent and so forth, and brought it all into one application, one craft, and tried to clean it up a good bit. So let's get in there, get into the code. Let's bring on the game sound. So we have a much neater version of the code now. I got rid of, actually these two can go too, these two excess functions. I can always bring them up from a previous version. And then there was one minor change. So here's our relatively clean code. You can almost see it by shapes. Right. This big bar up here is all the logging task. This is the hover PID algorithm for hovering. And I noticed this blank here. This was not a good thing. Apparently it just ignores it as if you didn't actually type anything. So I believe that's supposed to be, yeah, altitude above ground level is what it should be. And that would be here in the altitude. Go. Wish there was a hotkey for that dialogue. No, there probably is.
Maybe.
Altitude. Let's zoom in on that a little better. Altitude above ground level less than 15,000. That's where our radar altimeter seems to kick in. We want to slow down to less than negative 300, and that gives us a chance for our PID algorithm to catch up. So one of the other things I learned in the most recent tuning of the new craft, which we'll show you here after a bit, is that this second term or third term, 0.2 helps keep it at a much more solidly at its target altitude. You know, before we'd kind of seen it drop and go up and down a little bit. This stabilizes it a little bit more. Actually, a lot more in the other craft. We'll see how well it helps here. So we have, this is the whole big hop sequence where we jump up to a particular altitude, but instead of having it preset, I now have these individual action group buttons or tasks. And yes, you could probably put this all in one task or one function, but it seemed easy enough to just duplicate it. So what each one of these tasks is doing is just waiting for you to hit the Num 5 button, which is number 5 action group in the game. And I did these this way initially because of how one particular craft behaved. But really it's they should be switched. Because they should be default to false, except for number 10, which is the 0 button. And that one defaults to true. Or defaults to false. Everything else defaults to true. And the reason for that is 10 is also the reaction control thruster hotkey. Or action group. And what? How's it?
In your particular hotkey? Or someone else's hotkey?
The default in the game, I believe. Okay. I didn't set it up. I didn't intentionally set it up that way. So all these action groups that are less than 10 need to start with true. So basically what this thread does is wait until you push a button, one of these numbered buttons, which are the action groups. It immediately sets the action group back to false so that it's only once per button press. So I can't lean on the button and make it repeat or any of that. which is what happens with the actual directional controls. If you try and tilt over in your roll, as long as you hold the button down, the more you roll, right? And that's not the kind of control I'm looking for here. So this does an exact addition subtraction of 100 meters to the target altitude each time you press either 8 or 9. And then 7 and 6 change the pitch. Well, 7 sets the pitch to 90 degrees, and 6 and 5 change the pitch plus and minus 1. So that's how I'd been navigating with the sphere, pointing it in the direction I want to go, and then leaning it forward manually, and then trying to set it back upright just in time. Well, these are hotkeys for all that. They work out to be hotkeys. And that's the action groups. So, and then there is button 0, or action group 10, which is default the turning on of the reaction control thrusters. So initially your main engines are on, not your RCS, and therefore this is initially false. Actually, this is 4, not 0. I'm reading the wrong one. Switch these around again. So what button 4 does is actually switch between your target hover altitude being based on above ground level and being or above sea level, or average sea level they use here, I think. This just switches the mode. There's a new variable called flight state. Flight state 1 means I'm flying based on sea level. Flight state 0 means I'm flying on ground level. And the reason I put this in there is it makes a lot more sense. And you burn a lot less fuel for the time that you're hovering if you stay at a particular fixed altitude. Following the terrain was cute and all, and was, you know, if you're going to sneak up on somebody,
right.
But you use a lot more fuel because you're moving up and down for every little change in the terrain. And also this button sets it to whatever it currently is, wherever you currently are. So every time you change the mode, it switches to what your current altitude is in either mode. And that's a way to kind of override what you typed in. Or typed in. When you use the 8 and 9 buttons to put in as your target altitude. So each one of these,
typed them in.
Yeah. So each one of these loops is pretty much the same thing. Wait for a button to be pressed. When it's pressed, do something. I think this is a little more responsive if they're all on a separate thread, because alternately I could come through here and say, instead of wait until, I could say, is action group 0 doing something? Is action group 0 true? If it's true, then we go into that state, which for group 0, where'd you go? Here it is. Group 0, it's group 10 here. So this is the one that has to start off with false. So this is now what is actually on start. So we just wait until you hit the 0 button. We reset it, and then we do the hop sequence, which is this whole code, which is take off to a target altitude, come back down to 100 meters, we do our hover routine. Here's where we change how we hover. Really, it's just this variable that we're changing. But we change how we hover based off of what flight state is equal to. If it's 0, it's ground level. If it's 1, it's sea level. Don't mix these up, because ground level is generally about 5,000 sea level. So if you target that you want to like hover at 100 sea level, well, that's negative 4,000 ground level, and you don't get that deep. We don't have enough fuel to make a hole that deep. So just don't mix those up. So in any case, let's see. There we have. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same algorithm. Other than just choosing what baseline for the altitude. And let's see, I think that's pretty much it to the changes that we need to do here. Target ascent is pretty much the same. I did notice this. This is supposed to show, and I think I did this right. This is supposed to show the orbit apoapsis, the altitude, and the time to the apoapsis, and this was supposed to just show you as the time decreased, but instead it shows both the same value over again. It shows the apoapsis twice. So I'm going to do a little experiment, And
take that out.
well, I don't know if it's that you can't use one number. So these format strings are similar to printf. It it basically says whatever is in the curly braces is a substitute for your number. And you say, using the curly braces, you say, I want to use a number with one decimal place and zeros, no leading zeros. So you get a number formatted as something something dot and one digit. So if it's if it's zero, it's 0.0. And I believe if you put in like 3 here, you would at a minimum get 0.0. So I'm not sure if the formatting string can only handle one of those formats or what's going on. But what I'm gonna do, actually, I guess I didn't actually have to move them since they're drop downs. I'm gonna change this to the time instead of the actual apoapsis first, and maybe it'll show me the time twice. So anyway, you'll see why. I don't know if that's a glitch or I'm just using this incorrectly. But since it's just an informative little thing, it's not really worth fighting too much with. So this is pretty much the entirety of the code for this hopper sequence. And in theory, if we get to 0 lateral speed and we land nice and vertical and we don't fall over, which is another reason why we're moving away from this craft, is because it's very high center of gravity, and a real lander would be much squattier. And almost all of the actual lunar landers in design are squatty. So, except for Musk, he likes his vertical. And so one of the other things that forgot to touch on one of the last episodes was we were dealing with all the exhaust plume of your engine, right? And you having to the problem of throwing that out into space or
what to do with it.
Yeah, and one thought I had was, well, if you land in the bottom of a crater and the crater is small and deep enough, I should say not land, but you should decelerate while targeting the center of a crater so that any kind of exhaust plume gets sort of captured by the crater walls. And, like you have those blast shields at an airport. As the jet takes off, you have the blast shield at the backside to defend the buildings or a street or whatever. And maybe you could do that, but of course you don't land in the bottom of the crater. You just use the crater as the blast containment for your landing process.
But then you'd have to get out of the crater.
Well, but you land just above the crater wall using this kind of logic. Of course, you have to know how high the crater wall is, right? Of course, we should know all this. We've mapped the moon extensively.
Right.
So we may not know, as you're targeting the moon exactly what your depth is, but you have a planned one anyway. And so you kind of land in the center of the crater, but right at the height of the crater. And that's the majority of your exhaust plume is used up while you're decelerating from altitude. Now you're just gently hovering, barely putting out any fuel, so you can go from the center of the crater out to wherever, and now you're barely putting out any thrust, so you're not making so much mess. And then you land. So we'll do something to that effect.
Let's see it.
So, alright. I believe that's it for the code. And after this, I believe there's a way to just upload this to the website for sharing. So that's all with that. Save our craft. Off to the launch pad we go.
Where are you?
We're on Luna.
Okay.
And alright. So now we just kind of sit here. We don't go through the automatic countdown.
Hey,
we just
your
kind of
lighting
wait.
looks better today.
Yeah, we got a better angle with the sun here.
No, I mean you personally.
Oh, I don't know. I think it's the views window is all white, and so it's this huge white panel of light on me now.
Looks good.
Most of it is. And then when I switch over to OBS Studio, all that light goes away.
Yeah, it is.
So there we go. There's our data view.
Ooh.
Get that updating. And if you're interested on how we're doing all the data viewing and so forth, we have some previous videos talking about the views tool and so forth. But if I remember, I'll put a link in the description. But no promises. So now we're always showing the on this one we're always showing the altitude above ground level, or the about altitude above sea level, or average sea level, and then the other one is the difference between sea level and ground level. So we actually use that to get the profile, what we did last time in the mapping of the moon. So now we have some actual controls. We can do things like, say, I want a target altitude of, I don't know how high we want to go. I believe it was 1,000, if I remember right. I had this whole gearing laid out. Let's see, it's over there at 120. Oh, I want to do that, but luckily now I have time to change it before we actually launch. Yeah, what a plan. Making the craft reusable until I run out of fuel. And then we would... Huh, interesting. Well, put that back at 120.
Hi, everyone.
120. And let's see. And it was this direction by 15 degrees from horizontal, which is $165. Now I believe if I do this, we'll end up back where we had our little parachute field, and we'll get back to our friends. And away we go. 3, 2, 1. No point in making the countdown longer than it needs to be. And so we're up, and we should be flying over Trilobite Crater. Let's see, we'll speed up a bit. We gotta be careful here. Oh yeah, it shows the time twice instead of the altitude twice. Maybe I just have to do it like I did with the log. I put a format statement in for every number in the log, not trying to put them all in one line. Alright, now we're vertical. We gotta go retrograde to slow down.
Are you gonna land in that crater?
Not that crater, it doesn't look like. I needed an extra 100 or so to get to that crater.
Oh.
So now I can just hit F7, put myself back to 90. Yeah, target pitch 90. There we go.
Look at your flight.
Yeah, that's a lot of noisy thrust there, isn't it? And we're going backwards. So this is where we designed our... Yeah, we're bumpily on the thrust because we're flying over bumpy terrain. So I want to fly the other direction, but at this altitude. So we'll use F4 to fix the target to being flying at sea level instead of F4, number 4. So that we're flying at sea level, and then we can use 5 and 6 to set our pitch, and use that to slow our surface speed down. Hit F7 real quick to go back to vertical. F7, number 7. Now we're going in the right direction. So we'll give us a little bump of surface speed here. We got 5 or 6. Then we'll get to the double digits, and then we'll go back to vertical. And we should be going over some interesting terrain shortly. Coasting along, doo-doo-doo-doo. Go back to our views application. Zoom in on the low end of our flight here. Recent end of our flight. There we start to see the crater walls. Although, by doing that, I've locked the lower limit of the graph. So, we're about to go over this crater wall. I don't want to miss it. I started just saving the redo, or undo, I should say. It's easier just to do the undo. Wonder if I zoom in and give it a lot of bottom space like that. Let's see. Oh yeah, okay, bonus. I'm about to go over this bump. Then we should fall off into a nice crater below. Now, on the next craft, actually, you know, maybe that change to the PID algorithm was not good. We gave it a 0.2 in the D component, and it's never been this busy for hovering at a fixed altitude.
It's never looked like that.
Yeah, I mean, this one it was even much sharper. So I'm thinking that PID change was probably a bad idea for this craft. You have to tune them for each craft and engine combination and so forth. But clearly that was added a whole bunch of noise. I thought it would have... Oh, it's the other term. It's the integral term that's supposed to zero out this noise. So, now that we're flying at a particular altitude...
Are you going to land there? You're going to land to the next?
Well... I don't remember where my other moon base went. I'm lost on the moon. Oh no. Where's my moon base? Well, we're coming up on the other side of the crater.
Can't ping something?
Maybe I can find them on the map, but I don't want to leave this guy hanging in the air while I go look around at the map. Partly because he's flying at a fixed altitude. As you can see, the ground is coming up not particularly nicely right at the moment. Particularly sharply. Here we go. Here's our ground level. So we might want to find a flatter bit of terrain. Doesn't seem to be much flat terrain nearby. This is like general aviation, but on the moon. I won't take off and fly around, look around. This is not what we do yet on the moon. Primarily, we know exactly where we're going. We go exactly there, or within the realm of plus or minus. Within the margin of error, we go there. We don't jump around, look around randomly.
Hi, everyone.
This actually looks like a decent spot. Okay, so first off, to save myself from accidentally smacking into anything, I'm going to go back to above ground level, which I don't see it reacting to. This is a disturbing development. Alright, let's, oh. Because I had the thing off, that's why. There we go. So now I know I'm at target ground level. Let's go back the way we came a little bit. Seems like a decent enough spot, doesn't it? Looks flattish.
There's a dip right there.
Let's get a little closer. We're going to hit 1. That's going to drop us down to our lower altitude of 10 meters.
Oh, there you go.
And this is where we would do our pad printing height normally. But we can also look around at this altitude. Now that I have control over the pitch angle, better control over the pitch angle. But it looks pretty decently flat just about anywhere here, right? Looks decent. Looks a little hillside that direction. Unfortunately, this graph.
Figure it out.
Unfortunately, this graph only provides us a one-dimensional kind of view. All right. So first off, let's cancel out that. Lateral speed, make sure we got to get really close to 0, unfortunately. And then we're down. We're down. I said we're down. Cut your engine. You're supposed to hit 0. Alright, well this is the one time where it's probably okay to give it a negative target altitude. You're supposed to see what happens when you change that one derivative term.
Yeah.
And we get this bouncy effect that is apparently not within the right margin because he's got to get
those last minute changes, honey.
Yeah, those last minute changes got to be tested. Come on now.
Come on. Tell him, come on again.
He just bounces into the sky. I got no control. Oh, so one of these buttons needs to be a total program abort. Abort current program. Yeah. Oh, bouncy.
Oh, it's bouncing on its...
Oh, careful, baby. Stand upright, mostly. Well, he finally got below the target altitude for cutting the engine. That's what happened there. Clearly, he's got a bit of a problematic control. So we're gonna leave him here. We're gonna drop our data recorder. Plurp. There's our orange black box rolling down the hill. That's our little flight data recorder. Lets us know that we've been here, and then parachute. And that'll help us find ourselves next time. So 1,000 meters. Although we changed the PID algorithm, it might no, because the target APO ascent was the same. So we should be good. So we're going to try and find this craft again, but we're going to go change our PID back to the way it was. Oh, man. Well, that craft disappeared. I'm so used to just doing undo and exit and trying again, I forgot I was going to leave him there. Well, we'll have to be quick about it this time. So, let's see. Gotta be careful where you aim that thing. So that's the difference between 0.1 and 0.2. That makes it sound like if I want it even more stable, maybe I want a smaller number here. I don't know. This is part of why I wanted to get to a point where I had a reusable craft so that I could actually gather data over like 5 flights per fuel tank. Or at least 2 flights per fuel tank. And then I could actually tune these a little faster instead of this back and forth. But in any case, save the craft. Save the craft. And we're off. While that's loading, I'll get our data reloaded. You are hearing the sound of...
Yeah.
Okay, good. Up our data site. Alright, so we were targeting 1,000 AGL to set our first jump distance. It was at a course of 120. Sometimes you wish you could just type it in. And at a
There it is.
target pitch 5. Where did you come up with that idea? That is not the idea. Oh, because I hadn't hit 7 yet, so it was never defaulted. So what did we figure? This was 165, yes? That's what it was last time? So at least we go find similar craters. Like, let's give it 1100. Maybe we'll actually land in that crater we were looking at. Because that was the goal, was to kind of land in a crater, let it absorb all the major thrust of your slowdown, and then just hover out nicely to your landing field or what have you. You ready?
Yep.
3, 2, 1.
Hi, everyone.
And away we fly. Whee! Back out to the ridge. Oh, that didn't take much thrust. Boy, that second term, or third term, has a significant effect on the stability of the numbers and the hovering. I think there's a hotkey for retrograde too, but I don't remember it offhand. I'd like to put you in retrograde on landing. Here we go. We're targeting the crater nicely. Maybe. The one kind of right in front of our exhaust plume. It looks like we are. Let's see you. Looks like a flying downward. Looks like we're in the front of the ridge of it. Looks like we're at the ridge of it. We're not, yeah, there we go. Just on the, just a bit too soon. But we'll get ourselves slowed down under 10-ish. And then we'll upright. And we'll have just about, pretty good. 3, 2, almost 0 in the, on the lateral. Where are you going? What are you doing? You're supposed to be upright. Be upright. That seems weird. Alright, well, we got a little bit lateral. And again, coming backwards. So, we will zero out that lateral, and we're just going to land here so that I can repeat this very quickly. Alright, slow down. Once those dots disappear, pop the legs, and we'll come down to pad printing height.
Pad printing.
Pad printing. Landing pad printer.
That'd be so cool.
Landing pad printer activate. Well, not quite. He's still not quite at 10 meters. There he goes.
What if they make it out of papercrete?
What?
What if they make it out of papercrete?
No, they will not make it out of papercrete. Papercrete is a pretend material. No, it's not. It was this crazy idea of adding shredded paper to concrete, which is, as you would imagine, slightly flammable still.
Oh.
Oh. So there. So therein lies the danger of. Oh, you dang it!
Oh,
don't fall over. Ah!
Oh! Did it fall over?
Yes. You dang it.
Oh.
So, therein lies the danger of talking while you're flying.
Don't talk to me.
Don't be talking while you're flying. So, what happened was he was flying a certain 10 meters above ground level, but the algorithm was losing altitude because it's not quite tuned right. And it finally kicked off from 10 to 8. And at 8 meters, it's time to cut engines. And unfortunately, I had removed the auto landing gear. So when the landing gear came out, it comes out quickly and thrustfully, apparently enough to throw the thing around. Alright, well, I don't know if we want to do another mission, or I actually want to show you the other craft I'm looking at. So, a larger version of this craft would be something like this, which is the Centaur upper stage of the United Launch Alliance. And so this is using a Rocketdyne RL10 engine, which puts out 107 kilonewtons. So just to put that in perspective, this particular craft has a theoretical thrust of 200 plus kilonewtons, which is to say this engine is half as powerful as the fake one we've been playing with all this time, which means we need to get into some reality time. So what I've done is I've begun to model a new lander based off of the Centaur center stage, which at some point, I'm not exactly sure when, it was a few years back, they had a contest to say, what can you make out of a Centaur center stage? So this is the key diagrams of it that I was using for length and so forth. And this is kind of what it looks like inside the craft. Kind of hard to see here. What was the diagram I was looking at? So, in any case, this is the center stage. And there's a lot of fairing around it. So there's space to add things on the side of the center stage. And so apparently they said, well, let's see what people can think of to create using this center stage as a framework. And there was apparently a contest put out. Let's see. Here's one of the participants, the Centaur application to robotic and crewed lunar lander evolution. So I'll provide the link to all these in the list below, but these are their versions. This is your typical stage. This is your robotic lander stage, which looks pretty much like ours, or, looks not too far off. And then this is your human version with all sorts of solar panels and cooling and a secondary engine, of course, because of the extra mass. And then in the upper part of the fairing, you have this space where you can have a larger diameter. And that's what this whole habitat is. Now this is pretty, so there's the diagram of how it would sit inside the fairing. And, it's got nice little wheels here. Cute. So it's a goal, of course, you can tell by the wheels, is it would fly around like we would vertically, but then it would descend horizontally and land, and then, I don't know, I guess you'd have a rocket-powered car by that point.
Interesting.
If you could keep it on the moon, because there's so little gravity, just any amount of extra thrust is going to throw you up in the sky. No sky. But anyway, up into the air? There's no air. Up into the vacuum.
No atmosphere.
Up into the vacuum.
Up above the land.
Yeah, above the surface. There we go. And then also you see they have the other sort of outside tanks, so that you're not taking up a bunch of fuel inside the actual tank here in the main body. And then I like this one. It looks kind of like a bug. And you can see this is the size of the people inside it.
Oh, that's cool. I haven't seen that one.
No, I haven't seen it yet either. It's a proposed design, if you will. Yeah, 2 floors.
Interesting.
Whole lot of extra propellant tanks, and so...
Cool.
And you would land, and then...
I want to go.
On that lander, well, here's the proposed landing sequence. So you'd be landing backwards, as you'd retrograde do. You would come to this point, and you would make a land, no land decision. And you'd land using the horizontal jets.
Cryogenic descender jettison?
Yeah, well, that's the whole That's the main descender, right? That's the main thing that gets you out of orbit and gets you slowed down to the point where you can land using these smaller jets along the side. So you wouldn't want to be doing this maneuver here until you're going pretty slow, probably. Maybe 50 meters a second or something, probably. Not terribly fast. But they get to this point and they decide, oh, gotta go, abort. And if that's the case, then they jettison the big thing, and then the ascender takes back off, as it will at the end of your mission anyway. So it was just this interesting to me that, here you go with all the solar panels out. So in the morning, your solar panels are here. You've got the covers to protect your panels, but they're also reflectors to collect more light. So when you're in the dawn here, and then at noon here, and of course, oddly enough, you have to have a lot of heat radiation. I guess it's not odd. Just like it's really hot in the sun here in Fresno, uh, but okay in the shade. Anything that's, you have no atmosphere to give you any shade either on the moon. That's the other lack of atmosphere problem. So you end up with all this shading and heat radiation that you have to deal with, and then at night it's super freaking cold, and nothing keeps you warm but your nuclear batteries. So anyway, like I said, I'll send you a link to these. I think that was a pretty good solution or possible.
That'd be interesting.
One. The other one, the one that I'm actually modeling, is from our old friends at Mazda Space Systems. And this is their version, using the same Centaur center stage. All with external tanks. You see the descender tanks on the back here. So this can have all sorts of cargo. In fact, this is upwards to maybe 5 tons. A payload is their goal. That seems pretty good. 3,500 pounds is, that's the force created by the engine. So, and each one of them is all of 12 kilonewtons. So this is not these side engines that they're talking about here. Which barely even look like a jet engine, right?
Right.
They're just a straight nozzle engine, if you will.
Look at all the stuff blowing up there.
Yeah, that's their prediction of how much dust you gotta throw away,
I believe
right?
that.
Something we're not seeing in the game just yet. Maybe I don't have the effects turned on high enough. But apparently again, NASA likes to do this contest thing where they just say, hey, come up with ideas.
Well, you've been involved in some of that before.
A couple of them. So along those lines, we have... Get back to the game for me. In flight, undo, erase my shame. My landing shame. But the data remains in the logs forever. Alright, so our next craft.
You're at 44 minutes right now.
Yep, I'm just going to show you a quick version. That was the Unified Lunar Exploration Unit, which had all that ability to control and at least somewhat stably slow yourself down and all. And the next one's going to be the Luna Module. And the Luna Module is actually measured out. This is the proper size of a Centaur center stage, 10-foot diameter. I don't know if I can get the exact image and so forth, but I did match the performance specs of 100.
As close as you're going to get.
Right, I matched this. It's liquid oxygen, liquid hydrolox. It's a hydrogen oxygen engine. Melt the ice, separate the water, get your fuel, right? When it's done being burnt, it turns back into water. Of course, if you take the water off of the shaded part of the moon, and you use it for fuel, and you spew it on your ascent off the moon, yeah, you put all that water back on the surface of the moon, but a lot of it's going to desiccate and disappear into the lack of atmosphere, the vacuum. The reason it's surviving in the shadow of the moon, or in the crater, is because it's in permanent shadow. So it's not exactly like we would recycle the water. Like originally I thought, well, you just recycle the water. It goes back into the atmosphere. Oh, wait, there's no atmosphere. So, unlike on Earth, where we separate hydrogen or separate water into hydrogen and oxygen, use it for fuel, and it just goes right back into the clouds from which it came, right over Florida, right? Correct. Um,
Correct.
so this
Affirmative.
this inner stage here is a Soyuz style inner stage, but it's just used for stability because I'm not going to have landing legs vertically. I'm going to have them horizontally. So I've yet to build all that. We do have a docking port on this end, and then we have a big cargo bay. So this one has the same program, of course. Let's go ahead and bring her up once. We'll give her one flight just for fun, and then we'll be done. It's coming up, honest. Trust me. There we go. It wobbles around on the side. So, this is essentially the same program, but the PID values have changed. And it defaults to 100,000 instead of 1,000 at a time, and that was so that we could test the landing speed. So I haven't got the PID tuned. We're just going to see if we can manage to come back from orbit at max speed, and at 15,000 meters we kick on the PID and the altimeter, and we start trying to slow down, and this engine is just not as powerful, so I guess you can all take your bets on what's going to happen, but it's probably going to be kapowish. Ready? 3, 2,
Yes.
1.
It's not going to be papowish.
Oh, I didn't guarantee you a papow-free day. It also takes off at an angle instead of going straight up. So for this test, this was one of the tests we did in the earlier editions. You'll notice the plume is a nice pure white and not an ugly orange of.
It's a nice plume.
I said upright. Stay upright.
It's not.
Well, it's mostly upright. Let's see. Pretty close. And now we're flipping over. Why are you not locked on upright? So, just to give you an idea what this craft is made of, this bottom segment here is the fuel tank. This middle segment is the gyro, which is supposed to be keeping us upright. And then the command capsule is a command chip, and the orange black box is shrunk down, and that's all fitting inside this gyro can. Don't know why. Doesn't seem to be upright. Target pitch 90. Oh, it must be like relative to surface or orbit. I'm not sure why it's doing this, I gotta say. Well, that's what testing is, right? I guess because we were pitched over too much. We've got severely different, not aerodynamics, but we have different angles of momentum and not angles. What am I thinking? Different moments of inertia. That's what I'm trying to think of. So we're not as stable a craft as the other one was. Although most of the weight's in the bottom, I'm not sure why it's doing this. Well, let's skip past. Well, it's slowly trying to get there. Let's skip past the high altitude shenanigans. Here we go, coming back down. Now you want to be upright. Wonder if that's a specific issue with the gyros or what. Not sure why that behaved that way.
Excuse me.
But we're heading down to the surface at over 300. We shall kick into the atmosphere at not atmosphere. we shall kick into the point where our laser altimeter works at 15 kilometers, and then we'll start trying to slow down, which is probably a little too late. But we shall see. We'll speed it up at least double speed just so that we don't take quite forever. So next thing here is I'm going to add the side engines for landing. And then I went ahead and included big cargo bay doors. So you can actually put something there in the cargo bay and expose it to the surface. Even this looks like it'd be an interesting trip. You just take off from the surface, stand in there, they open the doors. Hey, take a look. So let's see, 430, 28, 27, here we go. We're about to drop from 20 back into the 15,000 fire engines at full throttle and try and get down to less than 300 or 200. I think I set it at 200. Yeah, well, less than 300 apparently. And now here it's burping again. And we're targeting 1,000 above ground. Come on now. Start firing any minute now. There you go. Is he gonna make it? He gonna make it? Maybe. He's below his target already. Oh, he survived. He didn't crash. Oh, he's gonna start jumping up and down. So this is where the F4 button comes in handy. Is just whenever he gets to the top and he starts slowing down enough. F4 again with the Fs. There's no F4s. It's all 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're gonna get up to where he's about slowing down, and then we just say, "Hang out there." Okay. So now he's gonna just hover at that location. Now it's again referencing ground level, not. I want to switch it over to sea level so that we don't wobble as we go over. And I didn't expect him to survive. I gotta be honest. So I didn't have the data connected. So let's reconnect the data real quick while we're floating so we can get our view. Now we don't have any landing legs on this poor guy at all, so he just kind of flops down on the on the surface. And if we're lucky, he'll actually not roll down a hill. What are you not updating? Actually, that looks like the completed flight. Oh, I know why it's not updating. I got a glitch in the log. Sorry, folks. No log data today for this one. No log data for this flight. Wah, wah, wah. Let's just see if we can manage to get it to land at all. So, make sure we're... zero out that horizontal speed. And actually, it might be fun just to land on the hillside and roll down the hill. Why not? Let's, where... Yeah, that should be, should be nulling out the speed nicely. Interesting. 10, 9, 8. Looking at surf speed here. 6, 5, 4, 3, maybe at 2. And it... Oh, we went sideways. So our thrust direction changed. There we go. 3, 2... It wobbles, and then just as it disappears, we go back to vertical. We put out our legs, but there's no legs to put out. So, but anyway, we triggered the descent down to pad printing height. which is going to be a bit of a disappointment because we have no landing legs. So we're basically going to come down to pad printing height, go to land, and then flop over on our side. Which actually was one of the thoughts I had. If I can hover at 10 feet above ground here, or 10 meters above ground, vertically like this, yes,
Yeah.
then if I tell it to hover at, um, it's got a similar burpiness near the bottom here.
It's doing the same.
So I tell it 90, and he just flops over, right? And rolls down the hill. Obviously, you don't want to land on a hill. But if you end up landing on a hill, you can put out your doors here. Wobble, wobble. Now, never mind landing on the hill.
That worked.
But the idea being that, maybe one day a week, that's going to be the great solar oven that you always wanted. But on a level ground, you would land not on your engine, but you would get down to a reasonable height, just barely above the surface, and then you would just tilt over and output shock absorbers instead of retro rockets. This should save some mass, save some cost, and then you just kind of flop down on your shock absorbers, and that's where you stay. So you don't have the 4 jets dropping you down from altitude, and you can get away with less complexity and fewer engines and all that kind of thing. So that was my first thought. I was going to put some shock absorbers on this guy, let him fall over on the shock absorbers, then retract the shock absorbers so that he's laying flat. And maybe that could work. It all depends on what kind of mass you have. So we're going to finish rolling down the hill here. Whee! Doesn't look too far.
Okay.
All right, well, that's pretty much it, folks. That was what we had planned for today. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you see, you got some ideas, suggestions, feel free to drop us a note. Be sure to like, subscribe, and all those kinds of things. That really helps out. Supporting us on Patreon, if you could, that would be a bonus. And we would very much appreciate it. We got some stickers and buttons to give away from our KSP days. So that's about it for now. Hope to see you next time. Bye.
Bye.